Welcome. Today, we are strapping in to analyze a cultural missile that landed in the summer of 1986, and, well, it changed Hollywood, the music industry, and military recruitment forever.
We are, of course, talking about the landmark film, Top Gun.
And this isn't just an exercise in reviewing the plot. I mean, everyone remembers Maverick and Goose. Our mission here is to move far beyond the narrative.
Right. We want to get into the origins of this whole phenomenon, look at the contentious production struggles, the military's heavy hand in shaping the final product.
And that commercial engine that made it a global powerhouse, plus its surprisingly complex legacy that, it endures to this day.
And to set the stage, you really have to appreciate the sheer scale of this film's immediate success. Top Gun was a commercial powerhouse from the moment it hit theaters.
I mean, the numbers are just staggering.
They are. It's produced on a budget that was pretty substantial for the mid-1980s, around $15 million, but it went on to gross an incredible $357.4 million globally.
That is an astonishing return on investment.
More than just a return, that massive haul solidified its position as the highest-grossing film of 1986, both here in the States and worldwide.
So it was clear from day one this wasn't just another hit movie.
No, it was a watershed moment. It fundamentally redefined the relationship between large-scale entertainment and institutional cooperation, especially with the United States military.
The material we've reviewed for this gives us some truly granular detail on how this project got off the ground, how these powerful producers secured naval assets, the compromises that came with that, and the surprising history around the cast and crew. We're going to explore what they sacrificed for that stunning realism.
Okay, let's unpack this right from the very beginning. What we recognize today as this massive cinematic touchstone started in a far more humble format.
Long-form journalism.
Exactly. The entire foundation of Top Gun was a magazine article. It was titled Top Guns, written by Ehud Yonah and published in California Magazine back in May 1983. And Yonah's article was incredibly descriptive. It was a fascinating piece of, embedded reporting that gave you a real look behind the curtain at the lives of these elite fighter pilots.
These are the guys training at Naval Air Station Miramar in San Diego.
Fighter Town, USA, as it was famously nicknamed. And the article, it just captured the adrenaline, the camaraderie, the intensely competitive nature, and the high-stakes lifestyle of this very exclusive military community.
And that atmosphere, the visual potential described in that piece, it immediately caught the attention of the ultimate Hollywood arbiters of action cinema in the 80s.
Producers Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer.
They were the dominant commercial force at the time, right? Fresh off massive hits like Flashdance and Beverly Hills Cop.
Absolutely. And they saw the cinematic gold in that high-stakes, fast-moving, high-testosterone environment that Yonah described.
They were certainly the driving engine, but the path from getting that article to actually getting a green light was anything but smooth.
Oh, this project really struggled to find its feet. It went through an initial wave of screenwriters, and maybe more surprisingly, several high-profile directors actively said no. They just expressed disinterest in the subject or were skeptical about the script.
And when you look at the names who passed on it, it's pretty remarkable.
It is. Filmmakers known for vastly different styles like David Cronenberg, famous for body horror and psychological thrillers, and John Carpenter, the cult classic guy. They were both approached and they both passed.
Which brings us to the pivotal choice of Tony Scott. He was hired to direct, and this is where that Top Gun aesthetic, that look, really began to form.
And he was selected not because of a previous feature film, but based on the strength of a very specific, very high-velocity commercial he had recently directed.
Tell us more about that commercial, because it really sounds like the blueprint for the film's visual style.
It was a commercial for the Swedish car company, Saab, promoting the Saab 900 Turbo. And the centerpiece was this stunning visual sequence. It featured the car racing against an actual Saab 37 Viggen fighter jet.
And Simpson and Bruckheimer saw that.
They saw that commercial and immediately recognized Scott's unique ability to stage speed, to make military machinery look impossibly sleek, and just bathe everything in this stylized, high-gloss visual patina. That commercial, more than anything else, was the reason Tony Scott got the job.
That decision really signals that the producers were prioritizing visual style and velocity above everything else. But even with Scott on board, the casting process was fraught with resistance.
Right. Tom Cruise, who became inseparable from the role of Lieutenant Pete Maverick Mitchell, was initially pretty reluctant to sign on.
So what changed his mind?
He was just unsure about the project, maybe sensing some of the same criticisms about the script's depth that others voiced later on. It took some serious persuasion.
Grogu.
Specifically, it took the intervention of Tony Scott's older brother, Ridley Scott, who was already a huge, respected director after films like Alien and Blade Runner.
And Ridley talked him into it.
He convinced Cruise that this was the commercial vehicle that would catapult him from a rising star to an international superstar. And Cruise finally committed.
And he wasn't alone in his skepticism, though other actors' reluctance was rooted more in genuine political principle.
Matthew Modine. He was offered the role of Maverick and famously turned it down. He stated his decision was purely political. He fundamentally objected to what he considered the film's glorification of the military and its perceived pro-war stance.
And he didn't just walk away. He chose a project that was the complete opposite of the Top Gun message.
Exactly. He went and did Stanley Kubrick's brutal, realistic look at the Vietnam War, Full Metal Jacket. That contrast just perfectly illustrates the ideological tensions that were surrounding this film in the mid-'80s.
It also gives us some context for Val Kilmer's involvement, who played Maverick's rival, Lieutenant Tom Iceman Kazansky.
Kilmer, internally, he mirrored Modine's reservations. He reportedly found the initial script silly, and he openly disliked the warmongering aspect he felt the film promoted.
But he took the role.
He had to. Unlike Modine, Kilmer was under existing contractual obligations with Paramount. He was essentially forced to accept it.
Which is deeply ironic, then, that his performance is one of the most memorable parts of the movie.
It is. Upon release, his icy, disciplined portrayal of Iceman was widely cited by critics and fans as one of the best and most compelling performances in the film. His professional obligation led to this iconic role that really transcended his personal disdain for the material.
So if the production team secured the actors, the next, and you could argue more complicated hurdle, was securing that sheer, mind-boggling realism that Tony Scott was demanding.
Which meant they needed the full cooperation of the U.S. Navy.
Absolutely. I mean, without the Navy's complete support, the film could never have achieved those stunning aerial sequences. They were vital for the realism.
They provided operational aircraft, experienced personnel, access to active carriers. They used assets and crew primarily from Carrier Air Wing 15, CBW-15. This was the key ingredient that elevated the film beyond just standard Hollywood model work.
But as we mentioned earlier, that cooperation came at a very steep price.
Financially, yes. Paramount was required to pay some pretty substantial fees for the privilege of using operational military assets.
How much are we talking?
The Navy charged U.S. $7,800 per hour, just for fuel, maintenance, and other operating costs whenever aircraft were flown specifically for the film.
Meaning flights that were outside their normal duties.
Exactly. And let's contextualize that fee for a moment. $7,800 an hour in 1986. If you calculate that for inflation, you're looking at roughly $22,100 per hour in today's dollars.
That is an enormous financial commitment just for flight time. What does that compromise tell us about the Navy's priorities versus Paramount's?
Well, it highlights a critical tension. Paramount was paying a premium for authenticity. They needed that visual integrity to sell the film. The Navy, meanwhile, saw this as an opportunity for unparalleled public relations and recruitment.
So they were willing to provide the assets.
But the actual cost of cooperation wasn't just financial, it was creative. The Navy exercised strong and detailed influence over the script, demanding changes that ensured their image was presented in the most favorable and, operationally correct light.
So the producers basically accepted that they had to sacrifice creative freedom and geopolitical complexity as the price of admission for those authentic fighter jets.
Precisely. They had to submit to military script approval. And we have concrete examples of these mandated changes. In the original script drafts, for instance, the location of the opening dogfight was Cuba.
Which would have been geopolitically sensitive, to say the least.
Very provocative. The Navy demanded it be moved to the neutral, sanitized setting of international waters.
And the scope of their influence extended to the dialogue and safety procedures, right?
Yes. Language and dialogue throughout the script were frequently toned down to eliminate slang or behavior the Navy felt was unbecoming of their officers. And what's more, a planned scene that would have depicted a dramatic but highly sensitive crash on the carrier deck was removed entirely.
They just didn't want that image out there.
The Navy wanted to control the visual narrative around risk and procedure, ensuring the final film emphasized their professionalism and reliability, not potential failures.
This level of control, interestingly, extended directly into the central romance of the film.
It's a fantastic case study in how military policy can shape a Hollywood romance. You see, the U.S. military had, and still has, these strict regulations prohibiting fraternization between officers and enlisted personnel.
Which created a massive plot problem for the filmmakers.
The huge one. Because early drafts had Maverick's love interest as either a female enlisted Navy member or even an aerobics instructor working on the base. Both of those scenarios violated strict military regulations.
So the character had to be immediately changed to a civilian contractor to make the romance permissible within the film's increasingly realistic and Navy-approved world. And that's how we got Charlie Blackwood.
And this character, Charlie, is actually rooted in the reality of Naval Air Station Miramar. She was based on a real-life individual named Christine Leggs Fox.
So she wasn't just an invention for the script.
Not at all. Fox was a civilian mathematician employed by the Center for Naval Analyses.
And what was her specific role there?
She was a specialist in maritime air superiority, often abbreviated as MAS. These civilian defense experts play crucial, highly technical roles in developing strategy and assessing air power, and they operate right alongside the pilots.
So by making Charlie a civilian specialist,
The script adhered to the anti-fraternization rules while retaining a link to the highly specialized expertise that was really present at the base. It was a very clever workaround to a real-world constraint imposed by the military.
the moment you start filming active military aviation, the logistical challenges just become astronomical. Where did the crew even begin to manage the sheer scope of this production?
Well, the physical production footprint was extensive. Filming initially began in Oceanside, California, to capture some of the civilian life elements before moving to the heart of the story, Naval Air Station Miramar.
But not all the flight work could happen over San Diego.
No, many of the land maneuvering sequences, especially those that required complex ground-mounted camera setups and low-altitude passes, were actually shot further inland at NAS Fallon in Nevada.
And they needed a stand-in for the enemy. The movie is constantly referencing the fictitious MiG-28s.
Those infamous MiG-28s were played by the Northrop F-5. The F-5 is a smaller, highly maneuverable and reliable fighter jet, which made it versatile for simulating the hostile high-performance aircraft they needed for the dogfights.
And using real F-5s, even as stand-ins, added to the visual authenticity.
Immensely. And there's an anecdote from the filming aboard the Carrier Enterprise that just perfectly encapsulates director Tony Scott's commitment to visual splendor, regardless of cost or operational difficulty.
This is one of the great pieces of Hollywood lore, isn't it?
It really is. Scott was obsessed with a highly specific shot, a dramatic backlit sequence of aircraft landing and taking off with the sun hitting the jets just right.
And while they were filming on the Enterprise, the ship's commanding officer changed the carrier's course for operational reasons.
Right. And Scott, realizing he was losing his perfect lighting, he inquired about having the ship return to its previous heading and speed.
And what was the answer he got?
He was informed that turning the massive nuclear-powered aircraft carrier back to its original course would cost a staggering U.S. $25,000 in immediate fuel and operational costs.
$25,000 in 1986, which, as we established, is about $71,000 today. What was Scott's reaction to that?
Scott didn't hesitate. He immediately, right there on the spot, wrote the captain a personal check for $25,000 so the ship could be turned back.
It's just incredible.
And that audacity allowed him to capture 5 more minutes of the specific, perfectly backlit footage he wanted. It speaks volumes about the level of uncompromising visual dedication Scott brought to the project.
The real pilots who participated in the film also added to the authenticity and the danger. Future NASA astronaut Scott Altman was among the elite pilots of VF-51 who flew many of the actual stunt sequences.
And Altman was responsible for some of the most memorable non-CGI moments in the film. He was the pilot who was featured flipping the bird to the pursuing MiG-28 in the opening sequence.
And he was the one who performed the infamous buzzing the tower stunt.
The very one that nearly got Maverick grounded in the film.
And that specific low-altitude stunt created real-world chaos, didn't it?
It did. It was so realistic and likely so jarringly loud that local residents in the San Diego area became genuinely concerned. They weren't aware a film was being shot.
They just saw a jet doing something incredibly dangerous.
Exactly. They saw an aircraft executing an incredibly dangerous and illegal maneuver. They called the Navy base and local news media in droves, genuinely believing they had witnessed a berserk pilot violating every safety rule imaginable. The film captured that thrill perfectly, but it created an immediate headache for the Navy's public affairs team.
And while we celebrate these technical achievements, we absolutely have to acknowledge the genuine tragedy that struck during production. It's a reminder of the extreme danger involved in capturing these aerial feats.
This is crucial. We have to remember, renowned aerobatic pilot Art Skoll. He was hired specifically for in-flight camera work, capturing footage from extremely demanding angles.
And on September 16, 1985, the filming schedule called for him to perform a highly technical and dangerous flat spin maneuver over the Pacific Ocean.
During the attempt, the aircraft entered a spin from which he could not recover. The final message radioed from his plane was chilling. He said, "I have a problem. I have a real problem."
He crashed into the Pacific Ocean. Tragically, neither his body nor the aircraft wreckage were ever recovered.
The loss of Art Skoll was a devastating and very real reminder of the risks involved in this kind of stunt work. It demanded a moment of reflection from the entire production, and the film was rightly dedicated to his memory, ensuring his sacrifice remains part of the film's official history.
The characters that emerged from Top Gun were so instantly memorable. Maverick, Iceman, Goose, they've become cultural shorthand. But how closely were these characters based on real naval aviators?
They were often composites, but definitely rooted in real achievements. Lieutenant Pete Maverick Mitchell, the talented but reckless hotshot played by Tom Cruise, was loosely modeled on the accomplishments of Duke Cunningham,
And Cunningham was a highly decorated naval aviator.
a decorated naval aviator, and notably an ace during the Vietnam War. That history of excellence, combined with an inherent rebellious streak, that formed the foundation for Maverick's character arc.
And the crucial mentor figures who guide Maverick, they were also based on reality.
Absolutely. Commander Mike Viper Metcalf, played by Tom Skerritt, the wise, seasoned instructor, was based directly on Rear Admiral Pete Viper Pettigrew. And this is a crucial link to authenticity.
So Pettigrew didn't just inspire the character, he actually worked on the film.
Yes, he served as a key technical advisor throughout the production. His presence ensured the dialogue, the procedures, the atmosphere all felt as authentic as Hollywood would allow. And in fact, for the listeners who pay close attention, Pettigrew even makes a subtle cameo appearance in the film as a colleague of Charlie's during one of the classroom scenes.
The ensemble cast surrounding them really solidified that military environment. Figures like Lieutenant Commander Rick Jester Heatherly, played by Michael Ironside,
And Commander Tom Stinger Jardian, played by James Tolkien, they provided that crucial commanding presence representing the strict standards and authority inherent in the naval aviation community.
We also saw several future Hollywood powerhouses early in their careers within this supporting cast.
Meg Ryan, for example, she appeared as Carol Bradshaw, the wife of Goose. And Tim Robbins played Lieutenant Junior Grade Sam Merlin Wells.
Merlin was Cougar's radar intercept officer, or RIO, and then later flies with Maverick.
That's right. And maybe we should just pause to clarify what a RIO is for those less familiar with military aviation.
Good idea.
Certainly. In the F-14 Tomcat, the RIO, or radar intercept officer, is the second crew member seated behind the pilot. They're absolutely critical to the mission.
They're not just passengers.
Not at all. They manage the weapon systems, target acquisition, navigation, communications, electronic countermeasures. They are the mission managers. The relationship between the pilot and the RIO is one of intense dependency and trust.
And that dependency is what makes the tragedy of Lieutenant Junior Grade Nick Goose Bradshaw, Maverick's RIO and best friend, the emotional core of the whole film.
And Anthony Edwards' performance just cemented that character's place in movie history. Goose's death is a brutal moment of dramatic realism within the context of high-risk flying. He dies during an incident where the F-14 enters an unrecoverable flat spin.
And though they both eject, he hits the canopy.
Right. Although both Maverick and Goose successfully initiate ejection, Goose tragically slams into the jettisoned aircraft canopy during the ejection sequence.
And while the Board of Inquiry clears Maverick of any operational negligence, the flat spin was an aircraft failure, the emotional fallout is what really drives Maverick's character through the third act.
The guilt, the grief, the inability to let go, that all leads to that powerful scene where he finally throws Goose's dog tags overboard.
And the emotional lineage of Goose and Carol Bradshaw is maintained right up to the sequel, Top Gun: Maverick, which arrived 36 years later.
It is. And while Tom Cruise returned, the impact of Goose's death is revisited through his son. You see archive footage of Goose, Carol, and even the infant Bradley Bradshaw.
Who was played by a set of twins, right?
Exactly, often just called the Weiss twins in the original film. And that infant grows up to be Lieutenant Bradley Rooster Bradshaw, played by Miles Teller in the sequel.
So the sequel uses the immense weight of that original tragedy as its main driving force.
It really does. Maverick's guilt over Goose's death. That's the central conflict. It just demonstrates how enduring and critical the emotional scaffolding of the original film remains.
Moving from the characters to the commercial machine that amplified them.
Yeah.
The music, we cannot discuss Top Gun without discussing its soundtrack, which just became a monster in its own right.
It was an absolute commercial titan. The Top Gun soundtrack transcended the film entirely. It became a defining piece of 1980s pop culture.
And the sales numbers were huge.
Massive. It achieved a 9i Platinum certification in the United States alone. To give that scale, that signifies sales of over 9 million units. And it dominated the charts, holding the coveted #1 spot on the Billboard 200 albums chart for 5 non-consecutive weeks in 1986.
And that success was certainly driven by the awards circuit.
The power ballad Take My Breath Away, performed by Berlin, provided the perfect sonic accompaniment to the film's glossy romance. The track, with music by Giorgio Moroder and lyrics by Tom Whitlock, went on to sweep the awards.
It won the Oscar and a Golden Globe for Best Original Song.
It did. And then you have Kenny Loggins, who became instantly synonymous with the film's adrenaline.
He contributed the hits Danger Zone and Playing with the Boys.
Right. And we have to credit the instrumental score provided by Harold Faltermeyer, who was known for his work on Beverly Hills Cop. His instrumental tracks, including the famous Top Gun anthem featuring Steve Stevens on guitar, just captured the high-energy, high-tech mood of the era.
And that anthem won a Grammy.
A Grammy Award for Best Pop Instrumental Performance.
It's surprising then, given all that success, that there were significant musical rejections and snubs surrounding the soundtrack's creation.
There was major musical politicking. The most famous refusal came from Bryan Adams. He declined to participate in the project entirely, aligning with Matthew Modine's earlier decision.
And his reasoning was political.
Explicitly, he stated that he believed the film glorified war. His refusal solidified the soundtrack's reputation among some artists as being inherently political.
And the selection of Kenny Loggins for Danger Zone was actually a plan B, maybe even a plan C, because of legal issues?
It was a complicated situation, yeah. It involved the band Toto. Toto had written and recorded a song for the film called Only You, and they were originally slated to record Danger Zone.
But something happened.
A complex legal dispute arose between Toto's lawyers and the film's producers, Simpson and Bruckheimer, which led to a complete exclusion of all of Toto's material from the final soundtrack.
Which cleared the way for Loggins to step in and define the film's action sequences with Danger Zone. It just shows how one legal hiccup can fundamentally change a cultural product.
And beyond the box office and the music charts, Top Gun played a pivotal role in a growing commercial revolution, the home video market.
It became a huge record-setting success in the then-developing VHS market. Why was its VHS release so revolutionary?
Well, typically, brand new blockbuster films were priced extremely high for the rental market, often $80 to $100 per tape, to maximize rental store revenue and stop consumers from buying them for private use.
But Top Gun changed that.
Paramount made the strategic decision to price the new release blockbuster surprisingly low for the mass market consumer, just $26.95.
That move signaled a fundamental shift in distribution strategy.
Absolutely. And this aggressive low-price strategy was coupled with a massive marketing blitz, an $8 million campaign that was just unprecedented for a home video release at the time.
And that included some cross-promotion.
A highly visible Top Gun-themed Diet Pepsi commercial. The goal was volume sales, turning the tape into an immediate consumer purchase rather than a rent-only item.
And that strategy paid off immensely, setting industry records.
It did. The advance demand alone set an industry benchmark with 1.9 million pre-orders before the tape even hit shelves. It ultimately sold a total of 2.9 million VHS units in its first run, cementing its place as a marketing and distribution juggernaut.
And it fundamentally altered how studios approached the lucrative home video market for blockbusters from then on. For a film that became such a cultural phenomenon, its initial critical reception was surprisingly mixed. Critics universally praised the technical achievements, the action, the sound, the visual effects, but they were often less impressed by the dramatic elements.
The romantic subplots and the film's overall tone were widely scrutinized by established critics. Gene Siskel, for example, delivered a sharp critique of the romance.
He said it felt simplistic.
He suggested it belonged in a teenage sex fantasy film.
But the critiques weren't just about the melodrama. They quickly escalated into accusations of political bias, militarism, and jingoism.
And that's where the conversation gets much sharper. The respected American film critic Pauline Kael was notoriously blunt. famously calling the film a shiny homoerotic commercial.
Her comment focused on the polished, consumerist nature of the film, suggesting it prioritized style and idealized male bonding over substance or realism.
Right. And filmmaker Oliver Stone, a decorated veteran of Vietnam who directed highly critical war films, he went even further with his condemnation.
Stone stated that the film sold the idea that war is clean, war can be won. He argued that it presented a sanitized, high-tech, and consequence-free image of military conflict.
He famously added that watching the film, nobody in the movie ever mentions that he just started World War III, which really summarizes the argument that the film ignored the actual geopolitical stakes of military engagement.
This criticism was so persistent that even Tom Cruise himself felt the need to address it.
Indeed. While promoting Oliver Stone's own book, born on the 4th of July, just a few years later, Cruise attempted to distance himself from the intensity of the political debate surrounding Top Gun.
He suggested the film should be viewed as a fairy tale.
Right, emphasizing that it was escapist fantasy rather than an accurate depiction of modern warfare or military life. Of course, the fact that he returned to the role 3 decades later suggests a complex personal reconciliation with the film's message.
Now, setting aside the political critique, the film's commitment to technical realism also came under intense fire from those who actually flew the F-14.
And this is where we can really look past the excitement. Former F-14 RIO Ward Carroll, who knew naval procedure intimately, was highly critical. He called the film as much cartoon as tribute.
While acknowledging its iconic status, he conducted a detailed review and cited 79 specific departures from naval aviation procedure, alongside numerous continuity errors.
79 departures is a staggering number, and one of the major violations is simply the way the pilots communicate and maneuver. In real combat, air discipline requires constant communication, strict spacing, and adherence to complex protocol.
Which is too technical and chaotic to be filmed accurately in a Hollywood style.
Exactly. In the film, pilots fly unrealistically close, they communicate with overly dramatic one-liners instead of detailed flight checks, and their maneuvers are often impossible or highly irresponsible.
And the disciplinary failures we see Maverick exhibit.
Those are major issues. The film trivializes things that would be career-ending in real life. Maverick's constant disrespect for authority, his impulsive actions in the cockpit, and certainly the act of buzzing the tower, flying excessively close to the control tower, would not result in a dramatic lecture from Viper.
So what would the real-life consequences have been for Maverick's actions?
A legal review highlights massive discrepancies between the film's narrative forgiveness and actual naval judicial procedure. Buzzing the control tower would likely lead to the immediate revocation of his flight status and a swift end to his career.
And if you consider the offenses committed during a time of war,
the potential disciplinary action escalates dramatically. Legal experts analyzing the film noted that some of the reckless behavior or insubordination demonstrated by Maverick in a combat scenario could, under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, potentially carry the death penalty if committed during a time of war.
So the film highly stylized military discipline to fit the romantic, rebellious narrative.
And in doing so, it ignored the harsh reality of military law and order.
Despite the overwhelming critical and technical scrutiny, the film's cultural velocity has endured for nearly 4 decades. We have to analyze its most famous and perhaps most controversial institutional impact: its function as a recruitment tool for the Navy.
This is the legacy Top Gun is most remembered for. The film's producer, John Davis, was unapologetic about this function. He stated frankly that Top Gun was essentially a recruiting video for the U.S. Navy.
And the Navy certainly capitalized on this perception. We know that recruitment booths were strategically placed in some theaters immediately following the film's release.
That's right. And the initial, highly publicized claim, which you often hear repeated, was that naval aviator applicants increased by a massive 500%.
But that figure is likely inflated.
It's highly disputed, yeah. Probably Hollywood hyperbole. However, modern, more careful analyses confirm a very real and measurable overall Navy enlistment increase of 8% following the film's release.
An 8% increase is still very significant. What context does that provide for the military at that time?
It was a crucial victory for the military's public image. Following the tumultuous Vietnam War era, the military really struggled with public perception and recruitment. Top Gun, with its sleek jets, clean-cut heroes, and technological dominance, was hugely successful in rebranding naval aviation as glamorous, aspirational, and heroic.
So it effectively rehabilitated the military's image for an entire generation of young people.
It did. However, the film's influence wasn't entirely positive for the institution, as we see when we look forward to the 1990s.
That's the complex reality. The U.S. Department of Defense Office of Inspector General cited the film's depiction of certain forms of cavalier and sexist behavior among the pilots as a contributing factor to the environment that eventually led to the real-life tailhook scandal in 1991.
The line between aspirational movie fantasy and real-world military culture became dangerously blurred.
Yet, on a completely different note, the film inspired individuals globally to pursue careers in aviation against major institutional headwinds.
The most remarkable example is Misa Matsushima, who became Japan's first female fighter pilot. She saw Top Gun in primary school and developed a lifelong admiration for fighter pilots.
And she enrolled as soon as the restrictions were lifted for women.
She enrolled immediately when Japan finally lifted its gender restrictions for women serving in that role in 2015, specifically citing the film as her original motivation.
And the symbiotic relationship between Tom Cruise and the Navy is stronger than ever today.
It received its ultimate validation in December 2024. Tom Cruise was awarded the U.S. Navy's Distinguished Public Service Award. This is the highest civilian honor that the Navy can bestow.
And it was given for his contributions through his film appearances.
Explicitly for his outstanding contributions to the military's image and recruitment efforts, cementing his status as a key non-military ally of the institution.
Its long-term cultural significance has also been officially immortalized by national institutions.
In 2015, the film was deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. It was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry, a move that recognizes the film's enduring importance to American culture and film history.
And of course, the film has left a definitive linguistic mark.
It produced one of the most famous movie quotes of all time. "I feel the need for speed." That phrase is so enduring, it ranks number 94 on the AFI's 100 movie quotes list.
And this quote had direct commercial consequences in the gaming world.
It did. The immense popularity of that quote was instrumental in the decision to name the massively successful Electronic Arts racing franchise the Need for Speed video game series. The film's focus on high-velocity excitement transcended cinema and fueled an entirely new form of digital entertainment.
Even the physical locations used in the film have become part of its enduring legacy.
That's a fascinating footnote. The Graves House in San Diego, the iconic seaside bungalow used as Charlie Blackwood's home in the film, was a beloved local landmark. When its demolition was threatened, it was physically relocated, renovated, and now operates as a high-end pie shop called Hi Pie.
So the film's physical footprint remains on the map of Southern California?
It does, and the film's influence and high-gloss style are constantly parodied and referenced across popular culture, proving its continuing relevance.
It's been lovingly skewered in comedy films like Hot Shots in 1991, starring Charlie Sheen.
And Team America, World Police in 2004. More seriously, its narrative structure and focus on military procedure inspired several long-running military television dramas, most notably JAGI, and the massive subsequent NCIS television franchise.
And of course, the monumental sequel, Top Gun: Maverick, arrived 36 years later in 2022 to immense critical and commercial success, confirming the original's enduring appeal.
And the sequel was dedicated to the memory of original director Tony Scott, who tragically died in 2012. And while Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer returned, the casting strategy was notable. Original female leads like Kelly McGillis, who played Charlie, were not asked to return.
The sequel chose to focus the emotional return entirely on Maverick's relationship with Goose's adult son, Rooster.
Exactly, played by Miles Teller, as well as that enduring rivalry with Kilmer's Iceman.
And the original film itself maintains its relevance through an aggressive re-release cycle.
It continues to demonstrate its cinematic power, particularly on the big screen. You had a major 2013 IMAX 3D re-release, followed by a 2021 Dolby Cinema screening, proving its visuals stand up to modern viewing technology.
And Paramount has already announced its plan for a 40th anniversary re-release.
For May 2026, ensuring that this cinematic icon will be experienced by future generations in the format Tony Scott intended.
We have completed our analysis of Top Gun's remarkable history, tracing it from an elite magazine article all the way to a global commercial juggernaut and a key piece of institutional history for the U.S. Navy. We started with a film that was politically criticized and technically inaccurate, yet it managed to transcend those initial reviews to become a timeless cinematic achievement.
And if we connect this back to the broader picture of entertainment and institutional image, we have to consider the incredible power of Hollywood fantasy. Top Gun achieved massive cultural success and demonstrably inspired millions, but that success came with a cost.
The necessity of the Navy altering the script?
Right, demanding the removal of sensitive geopolitical references and carrier crashes,
Right.
and the sheer volume of documented technical inaccuracies detailed by experts like Ward Carroll. It raises a profound question for all of us.
Where does the line truly lie between creating a product that honors military service, thereby boosting recruitment and morale, and leveraging pure Hollywood fantasy that compromises on integrity and real-world consequences?
That is the complex legacy this film leaves for you to consider the next time you hear Danger Zone.
Thanks for listening.